Hello there. Welcome to Book Talk. And I'm your host, Anthony Mwerore. And at Book Talk, we get to have an author come and tell us about his book or her book. And today we have a very special guest. Now, before we go to that, now this has been some trying times. And through the COVID, the pandemic that has been going on, the guest that you see on my side has experienced it more than any of you may have experienced. So at this point, I'm going to welcome into the show before we go into it, Radha Ruparell, and I hope I got that right.
You did. Good to be with you, Anthony.
You're welcome to the show. And we are going to know about the book that you have written, which is Brave Now. And it's about rising through struggle and unlocking your greatest self. And so we welcome the viewer this day, and we believe that from this point, once you hear this interview, you're going to be brave, like Radha Ruparell. And Radha, let's know a bit about yourself. Where are you from, and what you do in this current day, and maybe before the pandemic that we are talking about. Go ahead.
Sure. So nice to be with you all. So I grew up in Canada, of Indian origins to parents who grew up in East Africa. And so I consider myself a bit of a global citizen in the world. And what I do for the last 20 years is I've been working with leaders from around the world. So CEOs, Fortune 500 executives, social entrepreneurs, to grow and develop their leadership, right? Their inner strength, their ability to listen to one another, their ability to change systems. And these days I had a global leadership accelerator at Teach for All, which is a network in 60 countries around the world of leaders who are reimagining education. So I'm really passionate about leadership. I'm really passionate about personal transformation. And these days I do that based out of New York City.
Wonderful. So this is what you are doing and moving all around the world, impacting lives, creating leaders, and or rather bringing leaders into themselves and realizing their purpose and living it. And you were living your life normally. Anything that was not going on well before COVID hit?
You know, the truth is, Anthony, I was living my best life. I was in New York City. I had an amazing group of people around me. I was fit. I enjoyed being active. And so, yeah, before COVID, I feel grateful that I was living just a beautiful life.
Just like any one of us who were living well, I mean, a normal life. And then COVID came and infected some, affected others, and took many. And let's not talk about it as is in the past tense. This is something that is ongoing even as we speak now. We are experiencing a lot of people who are being affected, infected in very many ways. And it's not quite a good story to hear. But then it may sound different. It may feel different from someone who's only been hearing the news to someone who's really experienced it. And right here before us, we have Radha, who has not only experienced it, but experienced it to a tough position. And it's not only in the past, it's ongoing. And this is something that is quite a story that we are going to hear even before we really get what is inside the book that we are talking about at Book Talk. Now, you got infected by COVID. When?
Yes, so I'll tell you a little bit about it, Anthony. So it was April 2020, and this was, just to paint the picture for you. So this is New York City at the beginning of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. I didn't know anyone else who had been infected, so it was new. It was all over the news. This was a time when everybody was getting panicking. So you'd go to the grocery stores or the pharmacies, and you couldn't get any medicine on the shelf. This was just at the beginning of the time when the hospitals started saying, we are overrun. We don't even remember this now, but back then, the hospitals didn't even have masks. or personal equipment for their own staff. And what happened was one day I was just on a call, just something like this. It was a conference call with my colleagues. It was a Tuesday, and I had been feeling a little bit tired, and someone asked me to say something, and I caught myself getting short of breath, and I couldn't even finish my sentence. And I got off the call, and in the next couple of days, I got very, very sick. You know, I got so sick that I thought I couldn't get out of bed. I thought someone had drugged me with sleeping pills. I started having chest pains, like I thought I was having a heart attack. I would wake up in the middle of the night gasping for air. And so just in a matter, you know, I told you I was living my best life. I was healthy, I was fit. And in a matter of days, I was completely bedridden. And for the first couple of months, I had nights where I wasn't even sure if I was going to make it. And this was at a time that there wasn't space in hospitals. So it was a terrifying, terrifying experience.
And I can imagine that, because I remember when it just hit and people were, I mean, many countries went into lockdown, the fear, the stigma that was there. And now you're hearing about deaths happening somewhere in China, somewhere in Italy, and you realize that you have this devastating disease, and it does not only stay for 1 month. You talk about several months.
Yes. Yes.
I thought when I'm gonna get sick. Now I've never been sick with it, and I pray that I don't get sick with it. But I was imagining that when you get, and I have had a few examples of friends who've gotten it, and 1, 2, or 3 weeks they are well again. Now you talk about several months. This is quite.
Yeah, this has been and still continues to be one of the hardest things. So again, Anthony, it was just when you get sick, you have an expectation. So even when I got sick, I said to my colleagues, I'm sick, I'll be back in a few days at work. I just thought this was going to be like the regular flu. And again, back then, nobody even knew anything about it. And so a few days would go by and I would get sicker, and a few days and I'm not getting better. And that's when I started realizing, wow, this is lasting longer. But people would tell me, oh, don't worry, I'm hearing in the news it's a week or 2 weeks. But I knew what I was experiencing. But at that point, nobody was talking about it. What it turns out now, and this is more than a year and a half later, thankfully I'm much better because I'm here with you, we're having a conversation.
Yeah.
But even to this day, I still have symptoms. And what basically happened was I became one of those people that they call long haulers or have long COVID, where we got better in some ways, but we're still dealing with many things and we don't have our full health. And again, back in the day when that happened to me, that word hadn't even been invented. In fact, in my first 3-4 weeks, when I realized this was lasting longer than 10 days, and I finally had the energy to go into social media, it was these initial Facebook groups and Slack groups that I went on. The people in there, the patients, we who were dealing with it, actually started talking about it. And that's when there was a recognition that there's something beyond just the people who get sick for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and now it's good to hear this and realize this. And even at this point, maybe you'd like to talk to someone out there who's not got it, and some advice about avoiding COVID, because this is a core and we've got to spread the word in any way that we can. And you having experienced what you've experienced and you continue to experience, maybe someone out there is going to listen to you much more than those who have been watching the news.
Yeah, like one of the things, and I talk about it in my book, is the power of listening. And so if someone tells me they want to get vaccinated or they don't want to get vaccinated or they're scared, the first thing I want to do is I want to listen, because I think we're all in this space that there's a lot of fear out there and there's a lot of unknown and there's a lot of uncertainty. And so I would never tell someone something in a I know best way, but I will tell you this, having been through what I've been through and still dealing with this on a day-to-day basis, you know, I can now walk, but I can't exercise. I still get waves of fatigue in the middle of the day. My mind, which is one of the things I use on a day-to-day basis, sometimes it shuts down. I wake up sometimes in the middle of the night and my heart is racing. And I just never would wish that upon someone else. And the truth is, I just don't think you can know it until you've been through it, but I don't want anyone to unnecessarily go through it. And the truth is we just don't know which ones of us are going to get affected or not affected. It doesn't matter if you are healthy or not healthy. And so, yeah, my advice to people is I understand people are scared and we shouldn't live in fear. But do take it seriously because it is serious and it can affect anyone. And I just wouldn't want anyone to go through what I had to go through.
And yeah, and I can feel you, and I understand that we are at a point where, because from your answer I could get that we are at a point where you can't really advise someone on what to do confidently, because there are repercussions either way. So
That's right.
I hope you agree with me at this point.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think something that happens when we get scared in society is we just stop listening.
Mm-hmm.
We stop, and and when I listen to people, even if they say, I'm not worried about this, at first my reaction is, oh no, I want you to worry because of what I've been through. And I really do want to be able to share my story with them and get through to them. But yeah, we're living in a world where there's so much uncertainty. And so I think we need to listen with generosity.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I think thinking about the responsibility we have, like really understanding that this is one of those things where your actions can affect other people. So that's the one other thing that I say. It's not just about you. So do think about yourself,
Mm-hmm.
but do realize that actions you take that are risky can affect other people. And so that is something I feel very passionately about, that we should, we're so interconnected. And we've seen this with COVID, right? It's affecting people in every part of the world.
Yeah.
Or someone who is, taking risks could infect a whole bunch of people around them without even knowing. And so that's the thing that I ask people, do you want to be the one? Do you want to be the one that's hurting other people? Like, take that as a serious responsibility. And so that's the one thing I would say.
Yeah, thank you very much for that answer. We should all take responsibility in our own hands and be cautious of what we do and be considerate of other people in the actions that you take that could be devastating in the final end. Now, that's the advice on preventing and taking care. But then we've had these people who've been affected and infected like you, who's been going through the challenges, and now comes your book, Brave Now. There are many things in life that we get to encounter, the struggles that hit us when least expected. I mean, things that are threatening our future or our livelihood right now. And still, someone said life goes on, but it takes a strong person like Radha to say life goes on and continue living life positively, courageously, and successfully. Now, Brave Now. Tell us a bit about that book now. When did it come that you need to write a book? What inspired you? And about the process, maybe a little bit of.
Yes, yeah. I'll share a bit about the process because it makes me laugh thinking about it. Well, let me tell you a funny story. So when I was a kid, I used to like to write.
Yeah.
And I just finally got to visit my family after 2 years away. There in Canada. The borders opened up. And my mother shared with me the first book I wrote. I was 10 years old. It was 3 pages about a family of rabbits. And so we were just having a chuckle about that. Mm-hmm. But like many people, you go through your life and the things that energize you when you're younger, sometimes you forget about them as you grow up. And so for 20 years, I've been saying I should write. But, life gets in the way, you become an adult. Yeah. So, what happened was it was day 16 of my illness. And this is after, 2.5 weeks of just being completely bedridden. Mm-hmm. I was, living alone in my apartment. I just eating, trying to put some food in my stomach took energy. I lost 10 pounds in a couple of weeks. So, I mean, I was really, really sick at that time. But one of the ways that COVID manifests is you have sometimes these waves of energy. So you're completely bedridden, but then you have an hour or two of energy. Mm-hmm. And so finally on day 16 in one of these waves, I was so sick and I knew no one around me understood this disease. So I got up and I had a burst of energy And in an hour, I sat down and I wrote 2 pages. This is what I'm dealing with. And here are 3 or 4 lessons that I've learned along the way. And I just meant to share this with my family and friends just to inform them. Again, like you're saying, we hear things in the media, but nobody really knows anything. Anyways, Anthony, I'm not a big person who posts on social media. I'm a little bit private, but that day I just said, I'm going to post this. So I posted it on the publishing platform Medium, this 2-page article. And in 2 weeks, it went viral and 20,000 people had read it. And then people, my family and friends, but also strangers started reaching out to me and saying, wow, thank you for sharing your story, but also thank you for giving us perspective on life. Because I talked about slowing down, reaching out for connection. And they said, wow, this has given me perspective. And so those people encouraged me to keep writing. And so then over the next few months, whenever I had a burst of energy, sometimes on the weekend for an hour or two, I would put my thoughts down. What am I learning from this experience? Because Anthony, I told you, I spend my career working with leaders on their leadership development, but everything that I work with these leaders on, I had to apply myself on a daily basis, right? How to be vulnerable, how to be resilient, how to be compassionate with myself, how to listen to myself and my body and others. And so then I just started sharing these lessons, and that's how this book came to be. So again, one day, probably a month into my illness, I said, you know what, I'm going to put down my thoughts. And then a few months later, it was there. And I laugh because, again, sometimes it takes this challenging turning point in our life to get us energized about the things that, you know, maybe when we were 10-year-olds, we would do.
Oh, sure. I come from Africa, and you can't imagine the kind of strength that you discover once you are walking through the jungle and you meet with a lion face to face.
Yeah. Maybe that's a metaphor for what I dealt with, but now I know you're actually talking about the physical strength that requires as well.
Yeah, there's a good part of this, you writing as this book, having gone through what you've gone through. Now, it's one thing to listen to theory. It's another thing to listen to someone who's experienced it. And that's not even the whole thing. The best part of it is you going into that experience and drawing some lessons that you can teach some other people who could be going through the same issue, or who might go in the future through the same issues, and be able to face it, come out brave.
Yeah, and you know what kept me motivated, Anthony, writing the book, because I can tell you, trying to write a book when I was deeply fatigued and deeply sick, that was very hard. Like, that was a challenging, I mean, doing something like that is hard anyways, but it was challenging because sometimes I was so tired, you know, just getting up for 10 minutes and writing, sitting on my couch. But what really kept me motivated was I would be on these social media platforms, these Facebook groups, and every month there'd be hundreds of new people who would join, and they were just dealing with what I was dealing with. And it made me sad. You know, it made me sad because I felt very grateful. Like, I had good people in my life who supported me. I have, you know, the financial freedom to go buy medicine, which some people didn't. You know, I didn't have to take care of other people around me, so I was able to take care of myself. I'm in a workplace where my colleagues were so supportive, but other people didn't have that. And so I just felt so lucky and privileged to have support and access to some of these lessons that were helping me through it, that I wanted to make sure that other people who were struggling had access to that too. And because that kept me up at night, you know, I found people in even harder, and I felt like I was going through the hardest thing of my life. And I realized there was people who were going through this with even more obstacles and barriers. And I wanted to tell them, you know, there's hope. And it's not just for people dealing with COVID. So the book is about this idea that we all face turning points in our life. It might be a health challenge. It might be the end of a relationship, the end of a job. You know, this is human. This is what it means to be human. We're going to face this. And so the question is, how do you deal with it? And what I believe is, it's not that I'm strong. I actually think all of us have inner strength. But how can we cultivate it? Because I don't think we oftentimes realize that we can grow it, we can develop it, we can get some support around it. And I just want to give people access to some of the things that I'm learning and continue to learn along the way.
But sometimes it takes a person like Radha to call that greatness from within me, to remind me that I'm able, to just remind me that whatever I'm going through, you've gone through, someone else has gone through it, because we, especially when you are facing some big challenges, we tend to forget, and this is in agreement to what you said, we tend to forget that strength that we possess, and we need someone to remind us. And your book is going to be that someone who is you coming through the writing to remind us about this fact and call into action those inner strengths that we have and live a fulfilling life. Now, you talk about practices that give immediate freedom and power. Now, from that position that you are in, a struggling position, maybe a challenging situation that you find yourself in, what are those practices? Maybe
Yeah,
you mentioned
sure.
one or two as you were talking about your leadership trainings.
Sure. So
Yeah.
there's so many. Let me think about which one to share with you today. Well, the first is when we're dealing with something very challenging, sometimes what happens is we make up stories in our head about what's happening. We're not connected with reality. And that can be very disempowering. And so let me give you an example. After I got over the first 2 months, I started taking walks outside in the park, but my physical energy wasn't very high. So, again, I told you before, I used to surf and I used to run, but now I go to the park and I'd be walking up the hill and I would struggle. And what would happen is I'd start breathing more heavily. My heart would race faster. Like I wasn't even able to do a very, very simple walk, even 30 seconds up a hill. And what I started telling myself then is, I'm never going to get better. I'm going to always be sick. Like, why can't I just get up this hill, right? And so this story, this internal dialogue kept going off in my mind around, I'm never going to get better. And so one of the tools that I actually train leaders on is to separate what's actually happening from what's the story you tell yourself. So when I remember that tool, Anthony, I just started practicing it myself. So when I'd go up the hill, and it took a little bit of practice, I'd say, okay, it doesn't mean I'm never going to get better ever. All that's happening right now is I'm breathing a little bit faster than usual. All that's happening is my heart is going. And when I could separate what's actually happening from this big story that I told myself, it just gave me access to different possibilities, right? That means that, okay, the world is not going to end. It just means maybe I need to stop and pause and catch my breath at the top of the hill. Or maybe next time I take a different route. Or maybe I just have to be compassionate with myself that it's going to take me time for recovery. But instead of, ruining the rest of the walk thinking my day is over, my life is over, that's one practice I use. So just stop and be like, what's actually happening? And am I telling myself a story about it? And can I get rid of that disempowering story?
Now, are there some images? Now, good that you tell us that. Are there some images, some visions, some ideas that would distract you from those stories that you've been telling yourself and bringing you to the reality that is happening now? I want to understand that better.
Yeah, no, look, first of all, building that practice, it's a tough one. It takes time. Even though I knew it, it takes time. But I have a visual in my mind of two circles. One is what's actually happening. And another is what's the story I'm telling myself. And so sometimes when I'm struggling, I even sit down on a piece of paper and say, what's actually happening in reality? If I had to write it down, if someone had to observe it, if some objective person, because they would just say, okay, she's walking up the hill a little bit slowly. And then I write down, what are all my stories? And when you start writing down your stories, you start laughing a little bit because you realize they're not always all true. Like you often paint the worst case scenario. So that's a tool I use. Sometimes I just write down two circles, what's happening? And then what's my story?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then again, I think, I guess the second thing that I've learned through this is self-compassion.
Yeah.
Because, oftentimes we are so hard on ourselves, right? So even as we're practicing these new tools, we can get so judgmental. And so one of the things that I've done, and I do this with leaders, but I started doing this with myself, is a practice I call an acknowledgement practice. And so for 30 seconds every night. And this sounds a little silly and it sounds a little self-centered at first, but I'll tell you why I don't think it's self-centered. I acknowledge myself for something I'm proud of for the day, right? And so when I was first sick, it was just small little things, Anthony. It was, I got out of bed today. I made it for a 5-minute walk. You know, I managed to keep food down today, right? And later on, it was, I wrote a few pages of a book that I could contribute to others. But I would just take a moment to celebrate myself. Now, people in our world, we are so critical, we don't do this, or we think it's self-indulgent and that's kind of silly. Well, here's why I think it's not self-indulgent. When we're not compassionate with ourselves, we can't be compassionate with others. Once we start being compassionate with ourselves, we can be compassionate with others. Once we start acknowledging our strengths, like you said, Anthony, we start discovering and noticing our strengths and we can live into them more. So that's another small practice. Take 1 or 2 minutes at the end of the day and just celebrate yourself for something big or small. And in a world where the media is showing us all the things that are not working, gosh, wouldn't it be wonderful to have a world where we just take a moment and we focus on what is working?
And when you talk about that, I imagine about focusing. There's this illustration that I will give about focusing. When you are small, we used to play with some broken grasses and out in the sun, and we would focus it on a piece of paper or being naughty on an insect.
Right.
And then the sun's rays are focused on that piece of paper or that insect, and it will literally burn. And this is the power of focusing. And what you focus on, you can burn, you can bring fire out of it. And if you focus on the good thing, you can bring a fire of goodness from that.
I love that analogy. I mean, again, I grew up in Canada in nature, so I have also done that with a magnifying glass and sun. So you're bringing me back to my younger days. But Anthony, this is such an important point.
Yeah.
This idea of what we notice, and again, in our world, so much of what's thrown at us is negative, you know, in the media, in politics. And so I do think we can train ourselves to focus on the good stuff. And, you know, one of the things I started realizing with this practice of noticing the good stuff in myself was when I started doing that, I also started noticing the good stuff in other people. And so one of the things I'm so grateful for when I was sick is, and it's one of the things that probably helped me the most, was other people support, other people contributing to me. But here's what's happened in the past. That might have happened and it might have just passed me by. Now that I had stopped and started noticing, every night I then started thinking about not just myself, but who do I want to thank that day? Like and sometimes I would thank them silently, like right before I went to bed. They didn't know it. I'd send good energy their way. But more and more, I've actually started saying it to people. Like, you know what? When you reached out and checked in on me every day, that saved me. That made a big difference in my life. Or when you came by and helped me start walking again, like I had a friend of mine who brought his dog over and he'd like walk with me 2 minutes a day, then 5 minutes a day and 10 minutes a day. Like that gave me the courage to get back up on my feet. And so I do think we start noticing the beauty around us, and then we can start telling people that it's crazy, Anthony. We don't tell people about their strengths. And I think we should, because then it gives someone the courage to live into their strengths more.
Like, what do you I mean, do you really mean by telling people is about the strengths that we have or the strengths that they would bring out from themselves?
Yes. So I'll give you an example, right? You know, just the other day, I have a coworker who listens incredibly well. She's so generous. If I have a problem, she's a great listener.
Okay.
Now, I can just take that for granted. I mean, I've been in many meetings with her. It's a great strength, but we never just reach out and tell people. So I called her up that day and I said, you know what? I think you're an incredible listener. And thank you for creating that space. I just felt so heard, and here's how it made a difference in my life. And thank you for doing that, and keep doing that, right? It's something so small. You or like many of us are in relationships and our partners do so many things for us, like big or small, and we just take it for granted, whether it is cooking a nice dinner or taking care of the children or showing up for us, and we just don't tell them that. And so why don't we just stop and be present and be more aware of the little things that people do, and then go tell them. And it's very awkward. It's very awkward at first because we're not used to having these conversations. But what better gift is there than telling someone what a difference they make in a big or small way in your life? It's such a beautiful gift.
It's a matter of appreciating the little things about that happens in life, and we magnify. The more we appreciate, the more that grows. The more we.
That's right.
Yes. So when we appreciate, now this is what I would draw from that example that you've given of your coworker that is a good listener. Believe you me, that from the day that you told her that she's a good listener, she became a better listener from that point. So it's going to improve. When you tell someone that she's kind, now she's going to look into that much more and believe, oh yeah, I'm doing something and I'm going to increase on that. When you tell someone that she has a great love, a great heart, and she's going to try to find all the ways that she can be a better person and be more giving, more loving, and more present in the next
exactly. Yeah, it's so true, Anthony. And by the way, like I work in education. Yeah. This is what I really want for children. I want teachers and parents in their life who look at these children not as something to be fixed, not from a deficit point of view, but from an asset point of view. Like asking the question, whether it's your kids, whether it's your friend or it's your family, like we should all be able to sit down and look at the 20 people closest to us in our life and say, what is it that they bring that's unique? Because I think you're so right, Anthony. When we start naming that, when we start sharing that, it gives people permission to be exactly as they are and bring out their greatest strength. And what a beautiful world it would be if, yes, the person who's a great listener has the confidence to be that for many more people, or the person who's action oriented and can move things forward has even more energy to support people. Because then we give people permission to be themselves and even be themselves them even more. Because I think right now in our world, we get so much pressure to conform, and sometimes we hide the best parts of ourselves. So why not help people unhide that?
Oh yeah, sure. And then we create a ripple effect of goodness, a ripple effect of love, a ripple effect of every good thing that we can imagine of.
Exactly. And it's just energizing.
The other.
Exactly. It's just an energizing space to be in when you see people at their best, and you can help them be at their best and they can help them be at yours.
Yeah. Now, talk about seeing people around you that are at their best, and you can help them, they can help you. Now, we've got this challenge that we are in a world where it's full of negativity, and people are talking about the bad of the government, the bad of the institution that they are involved in, or the bad of the spouse that they are connected with. How do you deal with the bad, with the negativity that surrounds you? Like you find yourself in a group of people where they are going to affect your way of thinking, your way of drawing your inner strength and coming out strong. How do you deal from that environment?
Right. I mean, the first thing I think is we have to do the work on ourselves, right? Before we try to shift anything out there. That's the thing that I realized. And so one of the things that I've learned in this time is first taking time to pause and slow down and just be with ourselves, right? And I think when we are, sometimes it's a 5-minute meditation, or it might be stopping and taking a walk in the park. I think when we do that, I have a coach, a beautiful coach in New Zealand, and she has this practice called the Inner Selfie. Okay. And it's take 5 minutes and connect every day with what's in your mind, what's in your heart, and what's in your body. And when you just take 3 or 4 minutes to connect with that, everything comes up for you. So you might feel some negative emotions, you might feel some positive emotions, But I think that's the first step. First, accepting that, look, we're human beings and we're going to feel different things, because then when we do, we can connect with other people's negativity. And one of the things I realized is oftentimes when we dig deep to other people's negativity, the negativity is often insecurity or fear or worry or hurt. And so the first thing I try to do is, am I centered and grounded? When I'm centered and grounded, then I can show up with other people. And when they bring that negative energy, sometimes just by listening to them,
Yeah.
it can help that negative energy disappear. So I'm a lot about how you're being and how you show up can shift a group around you. And so I think a lot about, how do I show up? And I'm not saying it's perfect. Like this past year, I was stressed, I was tired, I was exhausted many times. And so sometimes I would show up and I would bring that negative, frenetic energy into a group. And so that's when I realized I need to pause and connect with myself. And when I am, and I can show up present and loving and full-hearted, it actually starts shifting something in the groups around me.
And the good thing is when you come to that realization, I wish everybody of us would have that strength and that courage to realize the situation that we are in and change it outright. But I like the fact that you have a coach, and someone who's been coached can also coach. Let me find out at this point, can you coach one of the listeners who is listening now and would want to reach out to you and say, I've been struggling with my thoughts, I've been struggling through this situation and I don't know how to come out of it positively. Yes, Radha is talking very good, but I need someone to hold my hand and push me on.
I mean, one of the, yeah, sure. Let's see, how do I do it when someone brings something that they're struggling with?
Yeah.
One of the things that I always try to do is just keep asking questions, just to get underneath the surface. Like, what's really there for you? Like, what's actually upsetting you? Because sometimes someone can be angry.
Yeah.
But oftentimes underneath anger, it's like, what's the need for you that's unmet? You know, what is it that you really, really want in your heart of hearts?
Yeah.
And, you know, and so, yeah, if anyone out there is listening, I mean, I'm happy to do this with you, but that's the question I would ask. And when you really come down to it, you know, it's not about the other person. Maybe you're feeling, I need to be understood, or I need harmony, or I need security, or I need a little bit of love, or I need a little bit of understanding. And I think when you can finally get to what is it that you're looking for, and then if you can have the courage to start sharing that with others, so instead of saying, you're doing X to me, or I can't stand this, or the media is horrible, you know, when you can actually get down to what is it that you deep down need, like at the core of your humanity, and then you have the courage to share it with somebody else, I think that's when things can start shifting.
So they're going to reach out to you because, yes, we know you've been dealing with leaders, you've been dealing with CEOs of big company, 500 Fortune companies, and training them. And but there's one thing I say, everyone is a leader. You are a leader, and you cannot lead others unless you've got the hold of yourself and led yourself from the position you are into a position that you'd like to go.
Yes, Anthony, I 100% agree with you. Actually, in our global network, so I think I mentioned at the beginning of the call, I work at Teach for All. So we're a global network in 60 countries. And in each country, there's leaders around the world, young teachers, but also others in positions like education policy and social entrepreneurs who are really reimagining the world so we can create a world where all children achieve their potential. And one of our biggest beliefs is this idea that we need collective leadership of many, many people coming together. And underneath that idea is the idea that, yes, we are all leaders. That means a student is a leader, a parent is a teacher, a teacher is a leader. And I 100% believe that, it all starts with ourselves. And so that's the other thing around negativity. We often start with you, like a statement around you, like you're wrong, you're to blame. And whenever I'm struggling, I always start looking inwards. I'm like, all right, what in this is me? And sometimes, and sometimes if you just ask yourself that question with no judgment, with some playfulness, okay, this situation is happening. What in this is me? You start discovering, all right, there's a role you can play. And then it gives you your power back, because instead of putting your power on the other person, you're like, okay, this is my role in it. Wait, I can do something about that. You can't do something about somebody else's role, but you can do something about your role.
Now that's strong. That's very strong.
Yeah.
Because I'm always looking. I mean, that's the general aspect of people. I mean, they're always looking at that other thing that is affecting my situation right now. I'm at this position I'm right now because someone did something, or someone did not do something that he or she was supposed to do.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it takes away our power, right? Because the minute you put it on somebody else. Now, I'm not saying that there are situations where the challenge is, if I think about things like racism or structural inequity, there are things that we cannot put just on one individual. Like there's things that we in our society need to change that, I've met children who grow up in circumstances that's no fault of their own. So I do think there's certain issues where we actually have to take a much broader collective approach. We cannot blame the someone who's been victimized since birth. So I do think there are cases where we really have to think about how do we collectively lead. And I believe there's such an important role for us to look inside ourselves, because we can find power there as well. So I believe both to be true. Yeah.
So yeah, and I agree with you. Even with the matter of the bigger picture, I need to be a perfect piece. Not really perfect, but I really need to be a perfect piece of the puzzle. Wherever I am, even though I may not create the whole picture, but at the point I am, let me be the right place at the right time, doing the right thing, and being my authentic self, and that is going to create or complete the picture as it should complete.
Exactly. And then you just realize you're part of a bigger humanity. So again, I love that you moved away from the word perfect. We don't have to be perfect. I have strengths, I have weaknesses. Then when I'm around a different set of people, I can bring my strengths, they can bring their strengths. But if we each take some ownership and leadership for how we show up, like this is something that I believe, how do we show up on a day-to-day basis? If I show up, and I've done this, and I'm exhausted and I'm tired, then that creates that in the room around me, because I can interrupt people, or I can be edgy, or I can be not a good listener, or I can say a comment that affects someone. So how I'm showing up matters. Now, on the other hand, if I show up and I'm grounded and I'm present and I'm loving, like that can change the people around me. So I think who we are being sometimes matters more than what we are doing. And one of the things I try to do is think about what are 1 or 2 words that describe who I want to be in the world. So for me, generosity is important. But then I think about, am I showing up in spaces being generous? And again, I'll be honest, it's 100% of the time it's not the case, but then that's the work that I do around, well, what does it look like to practice and be that in more and more spaces?
And I agree with you. It's never going to be 100% on anything. I mean,
yeah, we have to embrace the journey, right?
There's always going to be that space of improvement. This is the biggest room in the world, the room for improvement. And so, yeah, so we leave that space for there. Now, to someone who's just popped in on this video at this point, we are discussing the book Brave Now by Radha Ruparell. And Radha has had it all, experienced it all, the struggles, the challenges, and she's come out to tell someone how to come from them into being the person that you're meant to be, to drive out your greatness and live it out. And being with that experience and bringing it to us, we really thank you very, very much, Radha, and for availing yourself to come and tell us about your book. We really appreciate that fact. And the lessons that you've given us in this interview, they are really valuable, and we are going to apply most of what we've learned. although I know that you've not exhausted the book, but that's the reason why we leave that little room for someone to go and grab the book and read it in its entirety. So at this point, we could be ending this interview, but I don't like leaving an interview without hearing some parting shot. That's what I call it. Some few words that you'd like us to remember you with.
Ah, beautiful. Let's see. I think the parting thought that I want to leave you with is two things. One is you have more strength and wisdom within you than you know. And so just go inside and discover that. It's a beautiful thing.
Is it me?
And this, you do, Anthony, and I think everybody here listening.
And everybody who's listening. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
And the second thing I want to leave you with, so my book, Brave Now, what I want to leave you with is that I believe that everyone can be brave.
Yeah.
And it's not something big that, you know, only a few people can be brave. What I've discovered is that in any moment, you can choose how you want to be. And so in any moment, you can choose to be brave. And so if you're feeling stuck in life, just remember right there in the next moment, it just takes a moment to transform yourself or reinvent yourself. You could be stuck, but in the next moment, you don't have to be. And so just in a moment, we can transform. And so that's the last thing I want to leave you with. Choose to be brave, you know, choose to reach out to people for connection, choose to break out of your stories, choose to live into your strengths, choose to acknowledge yourself and other people in your life. You can do that in an instant, and it's such a beautiful way to live.
But I have a question.
Yes.
Do I become brave when I know that I've got it all? I mean,
no, it's the opposite. I think, you know, I think what I learned about being brave is it has nothing to do with having it all. It's quite the opposite. It's actually taking a chance when you know you're not perfect. It's you know, it's like trying something out and knowing you could fail and being okay with that. You know, I have nieces and nephews, and they get up on their bikes and then they fall down, and they get up on their bikes and they fall down, and they're very playful with it. So I think bravery is not around having all the answers. It's just having the courage to take a chance.
whoa.
And any one of us can do that.
Oh, sure. Thank you very much. Once again, Radha, we really appreciate you. And it's been quite an honor having you on our show. Where can someone get your book?
Yeah, so you can find it on my website, bravenowbook.com.
Yeah.
Or you can find it on Amazon. So just look up the book title. Again, it's Brave Now, Rise Through Struggle and Unlock Your Greatest Self. So I hope you check it out, and I hope you discover something powerful for yourself and your life, because that's the reason I am sharing this, because I just believe each one of us can discover something for ourselves. And I hope you find something for yourself.
Thank you very much. And also thank you very much to you, the viewer. And we would appreciate to hear feedback from you in anything that you've taken from this interview. And please remember to share it with your friends, with everyone around you. Let's continue to spread goodness. Let's continue to encourage others to be brave, and let's continue to live the best life that we can live from within. So once again, your host, Anthony Morore, and I'm telling you bye for now. Bye, Radha.
Bye, take care.
Yeah.